Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to have special guest Neil Twa of Voltage Digital Marketing. Neil, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. No, we dealt with a minor technical issue, so hopefully we can overcome that. We've already dealt with some adversity today to
There you
overcome.
go.
So Neil, I know you're in digital marketing and you've had a lot of success in generating passive, almost automated income, and you help others do the same. But for our audience who may be unfamiliar with you, what are you up to today, and why should we listen to you?
Yeah. So in simple terms, Voltage, the company you mentioned, we launch and we grow. We make profitable e-commerce brands, predominantly focused, starting with the Amazon FBA channel. We also acquire and exit those brands with immature. And so that's one of the things Voltage is primarily working on. It's part of a holdings company that also has multiple divisions, our own businesses in e-com space, both on and off Amazon, as well as another division, solar trailer division, where we're deploying 12 prototype trailers into the marketplace that are 5 kilowatt on-demand power stations. They can be put anywhere in the field, anywhere in the world. So those are some of the things that we're working on right now.
Okay, so our listener who's out there listening to you, ultimately, what are they going to get out of this episode? Before we dive into your backstory, what's
Sure.
the value add here?
Well, I mean, as we were talking about a little bit in the green room
Yeah.
before we had our technical issues, because I live in the country, we got about 45 acres out here, and one of the squirrels must have died, so the internet went down. So I'm operating this on my phone at the moment. We'll see how long this goes. Is to learn, that I was given an opportunity, my personal testimony, through a number of things that to this point in life have been major challenges, major issues, maybe things people are extremely afraid of. I've had to walk through that, both personally, financially, professionally. And so because of that, it's given me a great opportunity to speak on a variety of topics of personal experience in all of those areas. And so maybe today, one of you listening to this might be in adversity with a family. You might be going through a divorce, been there. You might be looking at bankruptcy or the financial concerns that faced in your business or personal life because of decisions. I've been there as well. And you might be facing health or wellness concerns with family, personal friends, wives, husbands, etc. And I've been there as well and had to overcome that adversity with my family. And those are all topics of great importance to me, and maybe for some of you today as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's not great that you've had to deal with all that, but
Right.
unfortunately, you've checked the all three of the primary boxes that I tend to find with my show, that the kind of major pain points in people's lives tend to fall into one or more of those three categories. So
They come in threes.
they come in threes. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully, you can stick with the abundance path for the foreseeable
It's been
future.
quiet for a while now. Yes, we're
That's
gonna
good.
knock on wood. I have something on here. No, it's been quiet.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Yeah.
So let's jump back and you can start wherever you'd like with
Mhm.
maybe the first. We're going to dive into one of those three a little bit more in
Okay.
depth than all three, but if you could kind of just hit on those three as far as
Sure.
what you've had to deal with from a financial, health, and relationship adversity standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the relationship one, because you're young and you make dumb decisions and you do things in life that beget the question. If you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell yourself now?
Sure.
I would literally, and this is going to sound really odd, but I would tell myself, don't change a darn thing, because you're
Yeah.
going to love how this turns out. But the guy that was in that period in storm would probably think very differently if he heard me say that, because he was dealing with personal relationship issues. He found a girl at 19. By the time they were 20, he was 22. They got married and then divorced by 28. So the issue in relationship to that was just growth and maturity. I lived in a very conservative family, which is cool because I'm now a conservative family. However, their boundaries were probably a lot more strict than mine. And so when I had the opportunity to leave to go to college, I kind of let loose a little too far to find myself, to go out a little too wide, a little too far. And eventually kind of settled back in to something a little more conservative. But in that place, the arrogance and pride and the goal and drive and ambition that I had personally given to me ingrained is just something that was very misplaced in maturity at a young age. And because of that, I took less time and interest in the people around me. And one of them was my wife. And because of that, that suffered greatly. And the self pride and arrogance and things that were powering that ego kind of left her behind, to the point where she eventually stepped out of the marriage and was seeing other men on the internet and
Mm.
traveling around the country to visit them when I was traveling, and I didn't know that was occurring. And so that was a pretty heartbreaking situation. That took a long time to
Sure.
kind of reconcile and realize my place in that, my issue, my concern, what was my fault, and what I did wrong
Hmm.
as a husband or a person that led to those things. And
Sure.
really some time to really think through that and adjust my thinking considerably. And because of that adversity, it's led me into a deeper relationship with folks around me
Mm.
in life now. I value them very differently. It's the second pillar of my life fundamentals. That's fun, people, and profit. We can unpack
Mm.
that a little bit.
Sure.
But the value of that I see very differently now through that experience that I needed to have in order to get me past that point.
Mm. Yeah, that's I'm sorry you had to go through that. I do
I'm not.
appreciate, I mean, well, on some level, I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like you've recognized the your ownership of it. You've taken ownership of your role in all of that, it sounds like, and
Yeah,
which
there's
is
no victim here, right? I'm responsible
yeah,
for what I did in my place in
sure.
that dance, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that can be liberating for sure, but easier said than done to get there mentally.
It
But
can be, it can be. You got to forgive yourself. That was the biggest thing and the longest thing.
hmm
It took me it was the hardest path.
hmm
Once I had forgiven her for the things she did, I had to
hmm
reconcile the things I did, and I had to forgive myself
hmm
for the way I was and the things I did to her, and what allowed her to become that person that she became
Sure.
because of the way I treated the relationship. And
Yeah.
at the end of that, that was the hardest part to reconcile.
Got it. No, I appreciate you sharing. I know it's not, it sounds like you're in a healthy place,
Absolutely.
perspective
Yeah,
wise,
we're
but
way past that now. That once upon a
absolutely.
time, that was a very tearful conversation, but that's
Sure.
long past.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can get you to cry on some other. No,
If you're not
I'm kidding.
crying, you're not buying. Isn't that the phrase in
I'm
marketing?
kidding. That's right. Okay. So that was 28. I think you said is when the divorce actually occurred, and then
Hmm.
walk us through the next few years. How did things pan out for you after that?
Well, I mean, I was still a bit on that destructive path. I hadn't got to that reconciliation point yet that I was just telling you about. So my pride and
Yeah.
arrogance were still leading me around quite a bit. And because of that, I kept pushing and pushing for new things and new things. And I met a wonderful girl in that process, very level headed girl, a very different girl than the one that I had married previously, a better fit. They say opposites
Mhm.
attract, right? It turns out my first wife and I were too much like each other, and that created
Mhm.
an enormous amount of conflict.
Mhm.
My wife Katie and I are very different people now, and 17 years later, that makes for a very good relationship. But
Nice.
at the end, it was a continued path of self destruction that led to relationships that drew people towards me who were destructive.
Mm.
They say you can attract, right? And what is
Mhm.
attraction,
Sure.
marketing, or attraction? Well, if you're spewing negativity out in the world, you're going to find negative people.
Mhm.
If you're acting bad in the world, you're typically going to get in a line with bad people. It seems like common sense, yet so much of the time we look around and watch people do this, right?
Well, it's
Uh,
easier to see in others than it is in ourselves, I think,
well, we're
sometimes.
blinded, right? Our,
Yeah.
our cognitive dissonance is kicked in, and we don't want to see
Sure.
that. We don't want to accept it. We don't want to believe it's true. And because of that, we're just going to keep operating in that space that we feel most
Yep.
comfortable in. And change is
Sure.
hard. Okay. So I didn't want to change.
Mhm.
I knew that was there, and I just wanted to bust past it. And I thought the best way to do that was just keep forcing forward in business. And because of that, I could not see certain things people were doing around me. I didn't want to see them and wouldn't acknowledge them. And one day, I had got myself kind of very far into a business transaction with a couple guys that seemed like a very great opportunity. And there's patents in it. And it was this really cool startup. And we invested a
Mm.
lot of time, energy, and money into that.
Mm.
It became a little too leveraged.
Mm.
Walked in one day and discovered the books weren't exactly the way they were.
Mm.
Why am I not getting paid? Well, that sort of answers that question. Where's the money been going? I don't know if I want to know the answer to this.
Mm.
And the end result was a strategic business bankruptcy that
Mm.
basically collapsed our financial situation in order to protect us from that, but also just to get out from underneath the problem we created.
Mm.
It was a very difficult decision. I like to own what I make mistakes on. And
Mhm.
I did make a plan to reconcile that. I just had, by the grace of God, standing with my pregnant wife at the bottom of Tulsa City Hall. It was the City Hall or where it was. We were down there. And it
Mhm.
was just a situation that was just like you could imagine, like Joel versus the volcano. I forgot that the other day, but
Mm.
he's living like in the basement and the lights
Mm.
are of him and they're blink. It looked just like that, just all gray and fluorescent. And I'm like, man, this sucks. And we go into this room, okay, and we're having to own this decision. And just like a few weeks prior, the company showed up to repossess the car at like 10 o'clock at night. And my pregnant wife is
Wow.
standing there crying as they take the minivan away with everything in it, like kids, car seats, toys, not the kids, excuse me, kids, car seats,
Right.
Don't use commas. Be
Right.
careful. Commas kill.
Right. There's
So
an important
it's
apostrophe there
an
too.
important apostrophe there. It's like, yeah, you got to be
Kids'
careful.
car seats.
We're
Got
eating
it.
grandma or eating grandma here.
Right.
Um,
Let's eat grandma.
the kids were not in the car seats. But
Right.
that was the thing that led to the next steps, which was having to go in and actually face the bankruptcy judge and go through that process. And I remember going through these double gray doors and more fluorescent, and it just opened up into this room. And there was just a table, and every table had a judge, and every judge was dealing with the bankruptcy, and they were running us in waves. And I was like, I've never seen, like, you think you're
Wow.
going to go from a judge in a courtroom and this is some sort of Hollywood thing.
Sure.
No, you're going into a room with a bunch of guys and gals sitting there who are determining the fate of whatever comes out of that
Wow.
financial situation. And by the grace of God, this gentleman who took a look at our situation, saw the backstory for a moment and the summary, recognized that while we had been a little bit of a victim, we had victimized ourselves in that process, but he took mercy on us and he wiped our debt out. So he gave us an opportunity to reset, start brand new at that point, and gave us a little bit of hope and opportunity that if we changed things and got on the right path, we were just given a big gift of opportunity. He didn't have to do that, but in a swipe of a pen, he took care of it and said, you see, you got a plan and you're willing to take care of this, but I'm going to get, here's my pregnant wife and I sitting there dealing with this. And he's like, you just, whoop, here's your goal. Don't mess this up. This is your chance.
So just a couple of, so what type of, I have just a couple questions, because I mean, getting into partnerships is a pretty critical piece. And I've dealt with partnerships that some have gone south as well.
Yes.
So first off, on the business side, any lessons you could throw out there for the listener as far as how to pick the proper
Absolutely
partner?
Part of the reason why that was easy for him to swipe the pin in that instance was that the debt was actually in the LLC that we had formed.
Okay.
So the LLC protection had a general liability insurance policy on it as well.
Okay.
So don't do business in the public world unless you're doing it in and beyond an LLC, and make sure you have general liability insurance for that LLC. The LLC should own the other businesses that you're involved in, and there should be a business that owns a business. If you do that, then you're basically hoping to protect your assets from the separate asset they may be doing business in the world by combining those assets. Example, my partner's LLC owns his 50% in Voltage, and my enterprise owns 50% in his LLC, and together that LLC does business in the world. So just these things were learned in how to protect and indemnify yourself, do business the right way, build a chart of accounts, and be very accountable to your best business practices. Get a CPA, go into the weeds and do the financial things and look at the negative, like Good to Great says with Jim Collins. You got to pull that rock up and you got to look at those nasty things underneath it, even as hard as it is. Take that power and look at it. And until that point, I wasn't willing to look at some of the financial problems that we were getting ourselves into. And I could have maybe turned it around sooner if I would have been a little stronger in that.
Gotcha. How about as far as even picking that partner in the first place? Any lessons there?
Well, greed is a very powerful emotion. Sure. And I sort of bought into the idea that this was going to be $1 billion company. Now, later on, as I would get past all of that and go into the world and see the other aspects of that business being replicated through major corporations, I did realize that that was a tremendous opportunity. However, it was squandered by weak minds. Weak minds in the business. I ended up being a victim of a weak mind. I created a weak mind in myself, but the other gentleman, I was not smart enough, savvy enough, and I was not willing to ask the kind of questions that would have finally led me to understand their mindsets. They were not as strong as they presented themselves. So the answer to that was time. Time is an ally. Okay, time can be an ally in the intent of waiting longer to determine and see the reactions of an individual, the way they do things, and give it enough time so that you have a very comfortable understanding of what they're doing. Right? Time can also be a detriment to you because you may need that time to gain something. And you can't necessarily wait the 12 or 24 months it might take you to evaluate that relationship, because you might need money now, or you might need the business now. So time can also be a weapon, can also be bad in that sense as well. If you are, again, time can be an ally to determining whether or not those people are sincere. You look around them for a while, do your diligence, and determine whether or not they truly have a consistent pattern of behavior across multiple points. And then, trust and verify, right? And those were things I was not willing to do because greed got in my mind. And I just said, I can't miss this opportunity. It's so big, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
it's going to be this great big next thing and yada yada, and people look at you and roll their eyes, right? It's like, oh yeah,
No,
okay,
that's really good. Those are some really good lessons you've pulled out. I mean, there's always going to be risk. You can't mitigate
absolutely.
every
Business is risk.
ounce of risk. But that's really good. So now, just you mentioned the business bankruptcy, but it sounded
Yes.
like, was this a personal bankruptcy that you had to file as well, or
Well,
was that
LLCs are tied to yourself, right? So
sure?
if the business
Yep.
goes down, your personal can go down with it.
Sure. Yep.
So as the business
Makes
had to
sense.
strategically remove itself from that liability, it
Hmm.
removed our opportunity and income as well,
Got it.
and therefore we personally suffered from it.
Understood.
Hmm.
Okay. So it sounds like the judge that you went before was,
Mm.
um, I guess, ruled in your favor in a sense. And then how did things
Yep.
go from there?
So once we got that, and we were a little bit dumbfounded, and kind of came off of that moment and realizing, wow, what was this opportunity? What did it mean? I
Hmm.
kind of went back to some of the core fundamentals of business and skill set that I knew I had, because I had to at this point sort of reinvent myself as to like, what am I in business and what am I going to do?
Sure.
The possibility of going and getting a job was on the table because income needed to be there. But
Yeah.
very shortly after that event, my wife got very sick.
Mm,
And because of that, it led to a situation with a high risk pregnancy that
mm,
forced her to have to stop working. So all of a sudden, we were at zero income. So the risk just got a lot greater. And with
wow.
that, dad had to take on more of the responsibilities of the household. She was put on bed rest. She was considered high risk, and we were taking her to the doctor twice a week.
Wow.
We thought we'd lost the baby at one point, 6 months in. Thank God that did
Wow.
not happen. But the end result was medical conditions now trumped all of life.
Sure.
So all that stuff
Absolutely.
was heading in the background that we all thought was so big, and everyone's so afraid of the financial crap. What happens if I don't have? Well, I'll tell you what. You can fall on a relative's couch and you can bounce back. But when medical issues are faced, you may
Yeah.
fall as org. That's a
All of a
very
sudden you have one wish, right?
all of a
And
sudden health trumps everything else. So at that
absolutely.
point, I didn't have that same desire to go get a job, even though I know we needed the income, because all of a sudden I had little babies. We had four girls, and they were
Mm,
all born in 4.5 years. So
mm,
suddenly I had all these little kids and a sick wife, and I had to take care of her, and I had to make
wow.
sure that that was, and it was an important part of that. And the provisions came. The provisions, I will say, are based on my faith, and they came from my God, and He is powerful. And He just said, you know what, you got to set here, you got to take care of your family, and let me handle this stuff. And so the money just
Mm,
sort of showed up. I remember one month we needed $1,856 and change to make those month's bills and get everybody fed and take care of the lights and make everything go. And I
mhm.
don't remember where that came from, but it
Mm.
was there.
Wow. So, and I certainly do, believe in the power of faith and as well. But logistically speaking,
Mhm.
who did that money actually come from? Was it people from your church or family
I
or?
honestly do not remember. I can't
Okay,
tell you the details. I just know that it showed up, and from
that's
there
awesome.
things started to change. As the health situation kind of progressed to the pregnancy, one of those things we learned was why was this starting to occur in her system, and how do we actually resolve it,
Hmm.
because of the medical issues that were there. And she was, in simple terms, she was becoming toxified by her environment. So
Mm,
by the food, the chemicals, the dyes, and the type of food we were eating and things, they were
mm,
toxifying her body. And because of the taxing of the baby on her body, it was affecting her faster than before she was pregnant, even though it was affecting her then. She just didn't know it.
mm,
And so that basically escalated that. So we became a process of learning about how to treat that, and how to treat, and discovered it was in my daughters as well. It's genetic. And then how
mm,
to treat them through that process, which has become a 15 plus year adventure in resolving that, including moving to the country and having organic chickens and eating organic beef and keeping a very clean, holistic diet, even down to the kind of shampoos. In fact, I created a shampoo line that my kids
mm.
can use,
Oh,
that is
cool.
non-toxic, gluten-free, dairy-free. It's got colloidal silver in it. It's on Amazon, and they can buy it. We get it and they use it, and it helps them
Mm,
stay detoxified. And so that
interesting.
beget opportunities to figure out what new incomes. And then because of that, I went back to media, some experience in media buying online for lead generation that I had done for previous companies.
Hmm.
And I started into the mobile lead generation side of things. I was uploading
Okay.
spreadsheets into systems. There was no, Facebook ads and YouTube ads, and there was no
Right.
Instagram and TikTok. I mean, those are just all in the last 20 years, right? And so we were uploading spreadsheets, and I was learning how to do mobile media marketing, and had a number of campaigns that I figured out how to get going really well. And suddenly we were going to 100, 200, 500, $1,000 a day in profit. And
Wow.
from there, things started changing really fast.
Yeah, and I love to dive into your business, today's business in a minute. Um, so as far as kind of getting out of it, I guess how did you make the decision to start focusing more on income? I guess was it your wife's health situation was squared away, and then what was that process like as far as your mindset change or your focus
Well, I
change?
never went away, right?
Sure,
Priorities were obviously to take care of health and wellness first, but that got to be
sure.
very expensive, extremely expensive. The girls could not eat in the regular kinds of formulas. They couldn't use the regular diapers because of skin rashes and things that were
Mm,
sensitivity. They had to use the special formula that was a little 50-ounce can that went out in like 2 days, and then we were running up with
mm.
like those in 3 days, and all of a sudden we're spending $1,500 a month in formula
Wow.
alone. So I'm like, okay, this problem has to get solved. So now the business
Sure.
has to be focused on, because the medical issues have now created a need,
Yeah.
and I've got to fill that need. How am I
Yeah.
going to do that?
Yeah.
And so that was
That makes a
just,
lot of sense.
you had to
Yeah. I
find
mean,
need, fill it,
yeah.
right?
And that's the thing with all this stuff. It's and I don't mean to like gloss over it. And that
No, it's
is
okay.
the that's the risk with my podcast, to be honest with you, is we just almost
Go on for
commoditize
like
people's
2 hours.
problems. And
Yeah.
well, no,
No,
well
we're
that,
good.
but the flip side is we just gloss over some real, pain
Mm,
and adversity that people experience. But the point I want to make is that it's all related. So
it is.
your health medical issues are related to your
Mhm.
finances and are related to your relationship, struggles or upside, if you will. So but it's trying to navigate, which one. They're all related, but you can't have them all
Well,
be
they're all related, because to some degree, I mean, finances beget health, and health sometimes requires finances, and so that becomes
absolutely.
a circle. But
Yeah.
the difference was, I changed from more of a greedy self pursuit
Mm.
that led to
Yeah.
those problems, and more of a, there's a need that needs filled, and I'm going to fill it because it's for someone else. So when
Sure. No,
purpose changed,
yeah,
everything
absolutely.
changed, right? And
And
because of
that's
that, with my back against the wall, that purpose was just, now, how do I take care of the basic
yeah.
needs that are met here? That's all I care about at this point, right? I have no more grandiose goals. I have no big, hairy, audacious, whatever. I don't have any 5-year plan. It's like, how do I get to next month?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's been a common theme with my guests, to be honest with you, as far as people who've dealt with very challenging situations and
Yeah,
how did they get through that? Well, I think probably the number one thing I've learned myself through these episodes is eventually you got to focus on others, and that really can become your purpose in
that's a
serving
very
others.
good motivator, right? And that's where
Absolutely.
tenacity. Okay, there's the
Yeah.
courage to start something, and a lot of people
Sure.
have that courage, but
Yeah.
they lack the tenacity and the consistency to see it through to the end.
Sure.
And that is something that I struggle with. If you do the disc profile, we were talking a little bit
Yeah.
about this
Hmm.
earlier,
Yeah.
from the Wealth Without Wall Street. What's my investor DNA, or how do I look at
Right.
business? And you should all go take a free disc assessment and find out exactly kind of what your personality and business profile is. I now know I'm a DI. Okay. I start things great, and I'm good at influencing and moving things forward, but I've
Yeah.
got to have that structure of someone behind me who follows in the consistencies. And my business
Sure.
partner for 10 years has been that person. My wife
Hmm.
is that person. And now I have a network of very super smart people around me,
Yeah.
who help keep that focused. And they allow me to be me. And that purpose in those people is now what drives me forward.
Hmm.
Their
Yeah.
happiness drives me forward. So there's the fun and people part of my personal thing now, right? And
Hmm.
from that, the third part is of its profit, right? And from that
Okay.
profit came opportunities to make money. And money has flowed by focusing on the fun and people part of that equation first. And now I have not just profit in finances, but profit in people, profit in life, profit in relationships,
Mm.
another profit that is just not financial.
That's great. No, I think it's critical to understand yourself. Like you said, the disc profile is one of many, ways you can start to do
Correct.
that. Um, but at some point, your drive and your purpose has to come from something
Beyond
much
self.
bigger than yourself. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So how did the business? Okay, so you've got the health situation, I guess, stabilized or at least
We're
improving.
figuring it out. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. But you've still got, at this point, what year is this when things started to kind of take off for your
So
business?
that were in around 2012, 2013, when I sort
Okay.
of took that initial mobile stuff I was doing in the years past, and I was working with some e-commerce companies, which was part of the transition. And so I'm now doing buying for e-com, and all of a sudden it strikes me one day I should be building my own brand. Like, they're
Mhm.
not doing anything at the last mile here that I couldn't do. So why am I not taking it from lead and acquisition through to the end? And in
Sure.
that process of due diligence, because at that point, It was set up employees, set up a warehouse, set up a product, set up a lot of other logistics that make that more complicated than I even knew how to do yet, and was figuring that out. And someone said, "Hey, you should see what Amazon just did." And I'm like, "What did they just do?" And I was like, "Well, just a few years ago, they bought a company, and they have called it now Amazon FBA, Fulfilled by Amazon." I'm like, "Well, what is that? If it's eBay, I want nothing to do with it, because that was all
Right.
like garage sale, shipping all this stuff yourself. I'm not cool with that." They're like, "No, no, no. You send your product to Amazon, and they put it in their warehouse, and they deliver it to the customers in like 2 days. And all you need to focus on is like the business and the product and logistics and marketing." I'm like, "Well, dang, I can do that, right? Let's figure that out." So I started flipping products on Amazon first to see how that would work, because to me, it was just another traffic source. At this point, it was people buying product. And they weren't just buying books anymore. They were buying all kinds of stuff. That was what opened up for Amazon. They went
Yeah.
from just books to all kinds of products all of a sudden. So this is cool.
Yeah.
So it's very, 2-lane highway at this point, and not what we know it is today. And so I just got into flipping products on Amazon to start, and I started to realize, wow, this is fun. I can make good profit at it. I want more products. So all of a sudden, it was like I could see this working bigger and bigger. And then discovered private label. I'd never private labeled a branded product before of my own, and that was discovered in that process.
Can you explain what that is for our listener?
Yeah, so there's the wholesale FBA side. You may be familiar with that, which is basically taking someone else's products and flipping it through Amazon. There's drop shipping, which is getting a product that's pre-made already, and then just getting the difference in the purchase of that product and sending it to somebody. And then there's white label, which is a product that's already been manufactured, but it's ready for you to slap your logo on it and send it to somebody so it sort of looks like you. And then there's private label. And the biggest difference is customization. So a private label product can be customized. We can innovate that product, make it unique, make it our own IP, trademark it, and go even as far as patent pending later on if necessary. And that product becomes part of our IP, becomes part of our brand. Okay. It is our Taco Bell to Taco Dial, whatever the other place is. Like Burger King to McDonald's. That's a better analogy. It's like CVS to Walmart. You have a brand that competes with other brands, and we have a customized branded product that goes in the market. That created more of an organic, continued buyer habit, emotional connectivity to those products than the previous ones were just bought on the current need or that emotional status in that moment. They weren't really brand driven. But once I learned the difference in private label with brand driven affinity, all of a sudden the organic and upside potential of the business goes through the roof. Most of us are brand driven. We just don't necessarily want to admit it, but I can make people fight on this call right now, asking you who loves Android and who loves iPhone.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're going to be arguing with each other.
Absolutely.
Because like it or not, we're brand driven.
Absolutely. So now I guess how important is Amazon to your business right now? I mean, in other words, if Amazon goes out of business tomorrow, highly unlikely, but or if they change their rules, which I know they do sometimes, how does that affect your business?
Not as dramatically now as it used to in the past. Amazon's created more brand affinity and brand connectivity and brand-driven aspects of their business now to support other brand owners, and are moving very fast away from anything arbitrage, drop shipping, wholesale, etc. So if you're in line with them of a business, if you're a brand registered company and you move to a certain level of business, they assign us brand reps, they assign us account reps. So the risk of Amazon is considerably lower in the way that we do the business model. Okay, the other business models are extremely risky and usually outside of their terms of service. So Amazon is a big component of the first stage of business when we launch a first product. We take it to market on Amazon. It's 38% of the market share, $630 million in sales. It is buyer purchase intent. It's one of the number one things all e-commerce sellers are trying to get, even if they're over on a storefront like Shopify trying to run Facebook ads on it. They're trying to get somebody to buy their product. Well, Amazon has that buyer traffic already. So I go there first and I prove the product and concept in that market first. When I do it, I'm looking for mass market appeal. Amazon is like the new as seen on TV, because if it's on Amazon and it's being seen, there's typically a woman 27 plus who's clicking add to cart 2 to 3 times a week to the tune of about $1,000 a year in purchasing power on Prime members. I want to take advantage of that, because I want it to $1,000 a year and each person to come to me and my brands instead of somebody else's. So Amazon creates that opportunity, but we have multiple channels. We have businesses that are on Shopify and running, the regular commerce, if you will, traditional website commerce, but they always cross over to Amazon. Okay. And Amazon should cross over to the other website. It's multiple channels, very important for risk and management, as well as the connectivity of the emotional people who get on and may look at it and say, well, I saw your Facebook ad, et cetera, over here, but I'm going to go on Amazon real quick and make sure that I find you, or to see if you're legitimate. I see
Okay. Yeah.
Amazon now as like the old days of brochure websites to determine whether or not the business is legit. If you're selling a
Sure.
physical product and I can't find you on Amazon, I'm most likely I'm going to buy it from somebody on Amazon because I trust it and I know the return policy. But if
Yeah.
I bought it from your website, I don't know a whole lot about you.
Yeah.
And I'm taking
Absolutely.
a little bit more risk. So both of those channels and multiple channels should be involved in the business if you're really going to build it as a business.
Got it. Um, so my daughter has been following these Air Jordans when they drop, and then she I came to her and I said, all right, she wanted a pair herself, and I said, all right,
Right.
I'm going to fund your next purchase
Okay.
if you can sell this pair of sneakers for a profit. And so
Nice.
she did. She bought. I mean, these things like they it's done and they're sold out in 20 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
So
Talk
we
about
both were
brand.
actually, yeah. So she bought this pair of Air Jordans, put it on sneakers.com and made, I don't know, $30 or something.
That's big money for
Um,
a little girl.
yeah, exactly. Within, a day.
Wow.
So it was pretty good. So trying to take it to the next level. So you and I might have to talk offline. You can
Oh man,
give
absolutely.
me
See,
some
I'm actually
pointers.
starting an intro to entrepreneurship course
Okay.
tomorrow
Oh,
for a
nice.
local co-op homeschool group where I'll be teaching them the beginners basics of entrepreneurship and business and fundamentals. E-commerce will be one of those legs.
That's
And there's
awesome.
about 8 people signed up for that right now,
Yeah.
and 14
Oh,
year old
cool.
up. And so we're going to teach them the basics of business. And arbitrage is going to be one of the things they can learn about. My 14
Nice.
year old has done that as well. Taken products and flipped them for money, and it's like, hey,
Yeah.
wow, I want to do this some more.
Yeah.
Teaching her the fundamentals of business.
Well, that's exactly it. Because I gave her the option. I said, "Well, and if you want to, then buy your own pair of sneakers, that's fine to keep." But she hasn't done that yet because I think she has the itch now. She
Looking
realizes she
for that
can
next pair of Jordans to go grab, huh?
exactly. It's
Very
repeatable.
cool.
So,
Yeah, it is.
um, so that's awesome. So, what is your kind of? I guess walk us through maybe just a day in the life of Neil Twa. What does it look like for you today? How much time do you spend on your own e-commerce business versus your coaching, or what does it look like today for you?
So I do have multiple e-commerce companies, both on Amazon and off, as I mentioned, but I have an operations team now, so I really don't spend any time in those details anymore. I'm in, on the business, but not in the details. So I keep up with what's happening in those divisions and make sure everything is going great, but I'm not in the operator status anymore. So that only takes me maybe 1 to 3 hours a week now.
That's
Because it's
awesome.
completely operational. So at that point, I'm out, evangelizing, talking, going to network events like I did in Alabama recently, doing
Hmm.
podcasts like this, and
Yeah.
overarchingly seeing the movement of Voltage Holdings forward. That includes the other divisions we do, as well as the solar trailer side, and we're looking at even building up a new mini fund this year with the guys at Wealth Without Wall Street. That will
Mm-hmm.
potentially be a buyer acquisition firm that is going to go out and purchase companies for passive income for those who get involved in it. So we're looking at
Nice.
that division. So we're working on that as well. So the day in the life of Neil right now is business discussion, deals, think forward thinking, being the CEO,
Yeah.
making sure I can try to avoid icebergs out there
Right.
in the ocean, and just trying to help direct the entire company forward as a leader.
Which it sounds like plays right into your own
It's perfect.
God-given strengths and skill set, right? I mean,
It
it
is.
sounds you already said you're not the best operator. I mean, you
Nope.
already it's not where your strength
That's
and
why I
interest
got
lies.
super smart operators around me.
Yeah. So how did you do that? I mean, how did you approach building that team who
Well, I
worked for
initially
you?
trained some of them up, right? And I trained alongside of my partner. He is more of the traditional MBA, speaks two languages, corporate. He never been in corporate, but he was in the business side of the world and learned how to build companies through the operational component. So he's
Mm-hmm.
very much the opposite of me.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, he doesn't understand all the marketing and communications and things that I do or have to do at the level I'm operating the company. So he's
Yeah.
just like, you handle that, and I trust you to do all that, and I trust him 100% to do the rest. And together, to each of us create one person, one mind, if you will,
Sure.
in that. And so, learning to give him that space or to teach him the things about what I know, and he's helped me structure certain things about the finance and operations that I didn't know, has
Mm-hmm.
been a very great learning and opportunity to grow together for the last 10 years, which has been extremely
That's great.
important. So I've trained myself and trained operators and been trained by them. So each of the people that run those different divisions were trained up by us together,
Mm-hmm.
and then they become operators in that. Typically, they're already moving companies themselves in terms of Amazon. So they're very smart about what we do in those areas of business
Mm-hmm.
or direct to consumer. We have a partnership in there as well, who's a very strong direct to consumer channel. marketer, and we work with them as well. They're operators.
So how did you overcome the fear? I presume was there from, from the partnership that went south.
Yes,
Why didn't you just say, I'm never having a partnership again? And I'm only working for and with myself.
absolutely. It really gets down to how you structure it. So each of our individual operating entities is a disregarded entity under our enterprise. And because of that, we're indemnified by whatever implodes in that LLC should that partner not operate correctly and we cannot remove them and or place a new operator in, or the business itself is just not viable for whatever reason, or something goes wrong with it. We have the opportunity to just simply detach that LLC from the main enterprise and not jeopardize the overall operation.
Hmm. Got it. Okay.
And if it does well, then we give them other chances to operate other entities.
Got it. So how big high level, as far as, you were at rock bottom. I mean, you went through some crazy adversity on all three fronts. At this point, what do things look like for you and your family personally? You don't have to give us exact numbers per se, but how has it treated you financially?
Extremely well. It's one of the reasons why I was at the wealth conference learning about some new things in terms of wealth building, becoming my own banker, and diversifying in other areas, maybe real estate, et cetera, on more the land flipping side, and looking at other opportunities to grow that, getting smarter about taxation and taxation structures, and ways to, play by the rules, but you still have opportunities to reduce taxation. So I've got some new relationships there, which are cool, which has been fun. And that's given me a lot easier ability to keep more of my capital, which goes right back into the markets and products and people that power our economy, which has been a blessing, not just to me and my family, but my others. And so this year, because we're getting to the size that we need to, those are things we're working on this year. We operate as a family unit. We homeschool our girls. I'm home here every day. We get to go to co-ops and do things together. Like I said, tomorrow I'm teaching that co-op class for the next 14 weeks, which is going to be fun. So I get to be there, and my daughters are going to be a part of that. And so I just get to do life very differently now, because I chose to choose a lifestyle driven business model that allowed me to keep that fun, people, and profit priority in the right order. And that's basically how we
touch on
operate.
that because I do have some rapid fire questions. I'll throw at you, but
Okay.
touch on that real quickly. Because I'm an entrepreneur. I have several different businesses that I run myself, and it's very easy to just keep working all the time.
Oh, sure. That's guys.
Yeah. But
or people, I should say.
how do you have that structured, as far as how do you stop yourself from doing that? You've already touched on it some, but from a kind of a day-to-day, personal level for the entrepreneur out there, how can they structure their week to make sure they don't go overboard and don't overwork themselves?
So I don't take calls unless I absolutely need to. If there's a justifiable reason for that call, I will take it. If it has an email or audio or a Loom capability, I'll do that instead. Yeah. So that gives me the opportunity to be more mobile, right? I use my mobile device a lot more. I try to balance that too, because I don't always want my children seeing the mobile device in my hand, but at the same time, they also see that as a tool, the same way I'd be swinging a hammer if I was building a house. So sure. we address that in terms of mindset, and we address that in terms of the tools and whether or not I can actually set it down if needed. And the answer is I can. And so what I do is remind myself that I can, and give myself permission to step away from the business. Right. Sure. And I know that sounds weird, but when you think about it, you have to give yourself permission to say, it's okay that for the next 2 hours, I'm not involved in any business activities today. Why? Yeah. Because I can.
The truth is, if you don't set that boundary, it's never ending. The work is never done.
It can't. And you know what? If you have a calendar and you need to schedule things because that works well for your profile, your mind, then literally mark it an hour that says go play with the kids, or an hour that says go have coffee with the wife, or an hour that says, schedule it and be intent. 21 days to a habit. It doesn't mean you're going to do it all the time. It just means when you start to build that habit of giving yourself permission and actually putting it down as a time, like the way you would do with any call or this podcast, then the next step is actually be actionable on it. Take it and execute on it. And then you start to free yourself up from, trading time for money, because that's all you're doing anyways.
Yeah. No, absolutely. If you look at someone's calendar their checkbook, their bank account transactions, you can essentially see what their priorities are, whether they've been intentional about it or not. That's exactly
learning that is so big, because then you start to realize, well, I can actually make more with less.
Yeah, that's
Life can
awesome.
be valued very differently. And it seems very odd to be on this side of it now, but
Hmm.
trying to remember what it was to be on the other side. All
Sure.
right. And so trying to keep that as a real, viable emotion that's still alive in me helps me to create balance in it.
Sure.
So, that's part of the reason why I'm okay talking about it, is because
Yeah.
that it creates balance and memories are there. So the history does not repeat itself.
No, that's really good. Um, I'm going to fire off a few rapid fire questions,
Okay.
and then we'll talk about your a little bit more about your business
I like
today.
the green M&Ms.
All
No,
right,
is that the kind of
cross
questions we're
that
talking
one
about?
off.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess
Got it.
that's.
Nailed it.
I guess we can end the show then.
We're done. Whew.
Um, what's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
They think that I'm too aggressive or mean or not as personable as maybe they think I should be.
Okay, I I can relate to that.
I'm 6 foot
Um,
5, so I'm also not your average.
physically imposing a little bit. I shouldn't say a little bit, because then when I meet you, run away.
We'll see.
Um, if you could go back, and you already threw this one at us already, but if you could
Hmm.
give your 18-year-old self some advice, what
Right.
would it be?
Stay the course, man. Don't change a thing.
Nice. I love it, because you've grown, you've taken lessons from your adversity, and you've applied them, and you're a better person because you went through all of that.
What would I change today? People would say, well, you'd want more money. Well, no, and that's not really the point. Again, you have to look at profit as more than just financial, right?
Sure.
The saying for a lot of us, health is wealth, right? And you have to understand the values in different things at different times and how to reprioritize those. So no, I would say don't change that. You need those things. You are not going to mature without them.
That's great. If you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would it be?
Any historical figure have coffee? Oh, wow. I never been asked
They
that
could
question.
still be alive today, or not, and it doesn't have to be your favorite person ever.
It would be my uncle.
Okay, why is that?
He's the quote unquote rich dad in my rich dad poor dad story. My dad was a hardworking man, still is, 80 years old, lives just up the hill. We can literally go run up the dirt path and
Hmm,
see my parents that live on the hill on our property.
cool.
But the end result is that he was more of an entrepreneur. He had a boat company. He got involved in a lot of opportunity later on in money and business, and gave me the opportunity to see things very differently about finances and money, and started setting me on that path long ago, to understand better the things I know now that I didn't understand when he showed me then. With my dad, who's very strong, blue collar worker, etc.,
Hmm.
money was a 4 letter word in our house. We didn't say it.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about it.
So, what's your view on entrepreneurship across? Should everyone be an entrepreneur? Should everyone have a side hustle, or is it not for everyone? How do you view that?
No, not
Yeah,
everyone is an entrepreneur.
I would agree
Doesn't
with
mean you
that.
can't be entrepreneurial in a
Hmm.
business that may be led by an entrepreneur. Again, if you know your profile and you know what works well, you know how to be okay in your space,
Yeah,
confident in what you do and where you are. And that doesn't always mean you're the leader who's going to take the arrows going up the hill first. That is not
sure.
the sexiest position. Sometimes it's okay to be number two. All right. In that case, you're taking less arrows. So, no, I don't. And I think that not everybody is in the right mindset for the risk that it requires. Uh, that most people think comes very easy to some of us, and it actually comes from a lot of school of hard knocks lessons.
So, speaking of lessons learned in business, what's one thing that's surprised you wouldn't have thought of 10 years ago, that you've learned from business?
One of the things in business that surprises me is the amount of different ways you can actually make money in today's world,
Hmm.
and how many people are still complaining that they can't find a way to make money when there are so many opportunities. It's probably more analysis paralysis than anything else.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
keep every once in a while I get people to come and they're like, "Well, I'm doing this, and here's how I make my money, and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Oh man, I never thought of that. Like, it's good for you. Like, that's amazing." And I'm not talking
Yeah.
about OnlyFans, just so we're clear, and I'm not talking about selling feet
Right.
pics on the internet, because I suppose that's entrepreneurial too. But
Right. Right.
with the internet has come the opportunity to create all kinds of income opportunities. That doesn't mean you have to be entrepreneurial. It means you may have something in the side hustle or hobby business, but I would always caution against that from a true business perspective. That is
Hmm.
actually a limiting mindset belief. Maybe people don't
Okay.
understand it, but let me explain.
Yeah.
If you go
Yeah.
and you say,
Explain
"This
that.
is a side hustle, I need to make X amount to make this meet or this thing occur, or whatever I'm trying to do with that money, and then I'm only going to be able to set aside like 1 hour a day or a week to do that," you've already created limiting mindset beliefs. The entrepreneurial or the person who recognizes business would say, "I will do whatever it takes. I will
Hmm.
stay up to whenever it takes. I will make
Hmm.
that happen no matter what it takes. I will
Hmm.
get this done. I am in
Yeah.
an abundance mindset now. And I recognize
Sure.
scarcity very different. It hit me very hard when I got out of the W-2 situation at IBM and I left to become a freelance management consultant and start my own management consulting firm right out of the first 5 years of my entrepreneurial life. All I recognized is that when I went to those first contracts and I shot the moon and I said, sure, $250 an hour, I'll come back and do this. IBM said at that point, sure, go ahead, let's do this. So I went from a W 2 employee to like less than 18 months later, making $250 an hour on their billables. But all I was doing
Hmm.
was trading time for money and more money
Hmm.
and a nicer glass
Right.
house.
Right. Right.
And so it took a
Yeah.
long time to recognize the differences in that, in scarcity and abundance, and realize how sneaky it is. So now, if you're going to do business, you need to do business as a business.
Yeah.
Do not treat it as a side hustle or a hobby.
Right.
Already, you're creating scarcity and limiting beliefs, and you're
Yeah.
going to set up yourself for opportunities
To
to
me,
miss.
I think of the Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant. Essentially, if you take that trading time for money as in a business, you're essentially in that self-employed quadrant still, which is
Yeah,
not the same as actually running a business. You just
correct.
you're working for yourself, yes, but you have another job that you're probably working 20 to 40% more than you were as a W-2.
It's another opportunity with different leashes and different masters.
Yeah, it's a great way of saying it. Let's talk about your current business and the opportunities that you have for people out there.
So currently, we are involved in the launching and growing of e-commerce companies. We focus predominantly starting with the Amazon FBA channel for private label companies to start up. Our goal is to build that what we call the platinum principle, which is that is a cash flow business that can exit for greater amounts than any time during the business building phase. So for that reason, we build a structure of a business with the exit in mind. So we launch products into e-com. We start with Amazon, and then from Amazon we move into multiple channels, and then eventually we exit that business.
Okay.
Predominantly focused on that for ourselves. We have a small coaching and mastermind group that also participates called our Business Builders. I'm typically looking at around 5 people a month that join that. Not a lot, and I'm very choosy about who gets involved. Don't have a sales team. Everyone talks to me. It's an application process. I want to qualify the right people in my network. From
Hmm.
there, network is net worth. So my uncles taught me long ago, it's who you know that gets you in, and it's what you know that keeps you there.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
getting involved with that community of people who are building as well is an opportunity for those who will qualify for those positions. And then we help them build companies. We work with them. We have done for you components of working with them, but we keep them at 100% ownership in that company. And then we help them exit that business later on by teaching them how to do the whole business model and then showing them how to replicate it so that they
So
can.
what's the specific profile or avatar of the
Yeah.
ideal person you work with?
So ideally, they typically balance between a D and a C in terms of personality and disc because they can start it, but they also have the consistency to keep it going.
Hmm.
That is a little bit of a unique hybrid in the people. So a lot of times they bring someone with them who fits that opposite profile. Could be
Hmm.
we got a lot of couples in here. We've got couples working with children who are helping them grow their businesses. We've got individual entrepreneurs and their partners of years coming in and working together because they know their strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes we have people who come in as solopreneurs that hedge on our strengths and weaknesses and to help them in reverse overcome any challenges of consistency and mindset they may not have as we coach and mentor them and move them into advisory roles. So that person is typically more conservative because that kind of fits with the nature of business. They are more,
Hmm.
they've been married for quite a long time. They typically
Hmm.
understand the capitalization requirements of business. They know they might lack knowledge in certain areas. And like me, if I'm going to go start doing land flipping, I'm going to pay the coach who does land flipping and help him teach me how to do it because I'm
Sure.
not going to waste time trying to figure that all on my own.
Yeah.
And so they understand the value of education and knowledge in the world, not necessarily institutional knowledge, but knowledge by association, which would be working with a mentor and somebody who's going to teach you how to do this. And they're typically those who are looking for other types of income streams. Amazon can be passive later on. It's not passive to
Hmm.
start it up. It can create what I call almost automated income. So if you think
Hmm.
working 10 to 15 hours a week in your business, but maintaining a multi 7-figure business with very strong profits is good, and I mean 18 to 25% net profit, then that's the kind of model e-commerce can provide for you. It can provide a lifestyle driven business, like I've shown. And then you can
Yeah.
replicate that operator by operator, channel by channel. So you're not limited to the growth and opportunity once you set the first foundation in place.
That's awesome.
So those folks usually understand all that. They get it. They've been looking for it. Maybe they've been riding around for a year or two or three, bouncing off all the courses and make money gurus and the done for you scams of auto shipping and Walmart automation and stuff and all this nonsense because it doesn't sound right to their ears. And then they recognize when they understand someone else is speaking business language, and they recognize we're building businesses with intrinsic value.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. Couple more questions here before we
Sure.
wrap up. What
Okay.
is a book or two that you could recommend for my audience?
So there are books that help challenge me in life. Well, I mean, I'm going to go with the obvious one for me personally, and there's a lot
Hmm.
to learn from the Bible. If you study and
Sure.
go through it, many lessons about life and finances and even raising your kids. From the
Yeah.
world side, if you look at like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways, that's a mantra I've literally set in my life by Susan Jeffries.
Okay.
There, most of the principles she extols are very good for just reminding yourself that you are going to have fear in life and business, but you should probably do it anyways to get over that fear and expand your thing, right? And then the question behind that she asks is, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I faced it. And some of you are afraid of it and you're not willing to push that risk because you're afraid of the outcome. But I'm telling you, there's worse things that can happen. You can do anything you need to up to in death. So you got to get out there and make it happen. And the final book is Good to Great. I know it sounds like an old and a little bit
Yeah.
of a cliche, but Jim Collins really nailed it. Even if
Hmm.
20% of the data is now outdated, the principles lined in that book of determining where you are in business. I'm a hedgehog. Okay. And if you read the book, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
But the end result is when I get into something and I put my teeth on it, I'm not going to let go. And I'm going
Hmm.
to do it with everything possible. That's both a positive and a negative for me. If I don't have a good support and community or base of people I trust around me, I'll end up like that guy who crashed the business. But I also need to be that guy because that is intrinsically who I am. And the people
Hmm.
around me now understand that. And they know that if they let me go, but they also help me stay within balance, everyone gains the opportunity. And so we work well in that way. But I'm that hedgehog. Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's a great study in business.
That's great. That's three very good recommendations there. I guess the Bible is what, 66. So actually, 68 books you just recommended.
68, if you break it down,
um,
68 books of reading, that'll take you through the next few years. Yeah,
that was an efficient way of recommending that many
no
books.
doubt.
So, looking back, just at all the adversity you've faced, I know you said
Sure.
you wouldn't trade it in
Mm.
and do it over again, but what's one or two just high level lessons learned that the listener can take away?
Surround yourself with the right people, and life gets a lot easier. If they don't sound right, if you're more positive and they sound more negative, you might need to distance yourself a little bit. If you see people that are really positive, they may be doing masking activity with productivity, so be careful to balance that out as well.
That's
So there's
good.
a median level of life where you try to find balance in between. Don't be so
Mhm.
extreme. Okay. Try to find a balance that allows you to work within the different types of personalities and gives you the freedom to be you. That's a huge life lesson. It's been
That's
for me
huge.
anyways.
No, that's great. That's really, really good, Neil. Um, Anything else you want to drop? Any other info? Where can our listeners find you online?
Sure. I mean, you can Google me. I encourage
Yeah.
it. Neil Twa. You're going to find me. Probably, I think there's a small Asian guy out there and with a similar name to me or around it. And then you're going to find the airline that used to be in business until it got bought. So I encourage you. You can find me at voltagedm.com as well. Voltagedmdigitalmedia.com. There's a free podcast on there. I've got a podcast, High Voltage Business Builders Podcast. You can check that out on Spotify and Apple as well, and listen to some of the case study success and other people in I consider to be high business builders, high voltage. And then you can hit me on any of the social media networks out there too.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil. This has been really good. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm happy to hopefully get to know you better over the next few months. And to our listener out there, uh, feel free to reach out to Neil. We recommend it. And thank you for spending your most valuable resource with us and Neil. And that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.